The email subject line read, "Good news about the villa." I stared at my phone screen in disbelief as my Tokyo hotel room suddenly felt ice cold. "We sold your seaside place to help Melissa with her financial troubles," my parents wrote casually. "You didn't need it anyway, right?" That beachfront sanctuary represented 5 years of brutal 70-hour work weeks. My sanctuary, my achievement, my legal property. Before I could process my racing thoughts, my fingers had already dialed the local police department. Before we get into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to join me for more real-life stories. I never had the perfect relationship with my parents. Growing up in Seattle with my younger sister, Melissa, it became clear early on that she was their favorite. Thomas and Diana Wilson, my parents, made that painfully obvious without ever saying it directly. While I worked hard through high school and earned scholarships to put myself through college, Melissa received a brand new car on her 16th birthday and had her entire education funded without question. I majored in software engineering, working part-time jobs throughout college to cover my living expenses. Those years taught me independence and financial discipline. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a cybersecurity firm where I worked ridiculous hours, constantly pushing myself to climb the corporate ladder. By 29, I had become the lead architect for our international security protocols, commanding a salary that my teenage self could never have imagined. At 32, after years of saving and careful financial planning, I purchased my dream property, a stunning seaside villa in Northern California. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling, windows facing the Pacific Ocean, and a wraparound deck where I could drink my morning coffee to the sound of crashing waves. That place represented everything I had worked for: independence, security, and most importantly, a boundary between myself and my family dynamics. My parents had a complicated reaction to my success. They loved bragging about their son, the successful tech executive, to their friends. But in private conversations, they often undermined my choices. "Why spend so much on a house when you live alone?" my mother would ask. "You should be thinking about settling down instead of buying fancy properties," my father would add. I learned to smile and change the subject, keeping my true feelings hidden behind polite responses. The contrast between how my parents treated me versus Melissa became more pronounced as we entered adulthood. Her financial troubles began in her teens with maxed-out credit cards that my parents quietly paid off. In her 20s, she launched 3 different businesses: a jewelry store, a life coaching practice, and an organic bakery. Each venture followed the same pattern: initial excitement, poor management mounting debts, and eventually my parents stepping in to cover the losses. I tried helping Melissa once, sitting down with her to create a realistic budget when she was 26. I showed her how to track expenses, build an emergency fund, and live within her means. She listened politely, then completely ignored every suggestion. 3 months later, she called asking to borrow $5,000 for rent because she had spent her money on a spontaneous trip to Miami with friends. That was the moment I stopped directly helping her financially. When she called with money emergencies, I would offer advice instead of cash. This made me the villain in family conversations. "Reed is so stingy," they would say. "He has more than enough to help but chooses not to." What they never acknowledged was how their constant bailouts enabled Melissa to avoid the consequences of her actions. 2 years ago, I began hearing whispers about Melissa frequenting casinos. My cousin Jack mentioned seeing her celebrating a big win at a high-stakes poker table. When I carefully brought this up with my parents, they dismissed it as just having fun occasionally. I tried talking to Melissa directly, but she laughed it off as no big deal. Our already distant relationship grew even colder after that conversation. Last month, my company sent me to Tokyo to negotiate an international software security contract worth millions. This was the biggest professional opportunity of my career. Preparing presentations, coordinating with our legal team, and rehearsing negotiations consumed my days and nights for weeks. Despite the stress, I was excited about representing our company on the global stage. Throughout my preparation, I maintained regular video calls with my parents. They seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking questions about Japanese culture and requesting souvenirs. Not once did they mention any problems with Melissa or hint at financial troubles. In fact, they appeared more supportive than usual, commenting on how professional my hotel room looked during our video chats and asking me to share views of Tokyo from my window. "We are so proud of you, Reed," my mother said during our last call. "This contract shows how valuable you are to your company." I felt a rare moment of connection with them. Between intense negotiation sessions, I researched Japanese gifts to bring home for everyone, including a limited edition collectible for Melissa. I even sent them pictures of Tokyo Tower lit up at night, feeling like I was sharing this important experience with my family despite the distance. Each evening after grueling meetings, I would return to my hotel room and think about the peaceful retreat waiting for me back home. My villa represented the perfect balance to my high-stress career. Its isolation, the natural beauty, and the constant rhythm of waves had become essential to my mental well-being. I looked forward to walking barefoot on my private beach section after the business trip concluded. Then came the email that shattered everything. It arrived on day 5 of my 7-day trip, just after I had secured preliminary agreement on the contract terms. The casual subject line gave no indication of its devastating contents. "Good news about the villa," read the email from my parents' shared account. The message continued in the same breezy tone. "We wanted to let you know that we found a buyer for your beach house. Melissa ran into some financial troubles with some casino people, $230, 0000 to be exact, and they were making some pretty scary threats. Family sticks together during crises, so we knew you would want to help. The sale should cover her debts with a little left over. You didn't need all that space anyway, right? You're always traveling for work. Love, Mom and Dad." My hands shook so violently I dropped my phone. The room seemed to spin as I struggled to breathe. This could not possibly be real. They had sold my home, my legal property, without my knowledge or consent, to pay off Melissa's gambling debts. I immediately tried calling them, but both their phones went straight to voicemail. I sent a series of increasingly desperate text messages. "What are you talking about? You cannot sell my house. Call me immediately. This is illegal. You have no right to sell my property." Almost an hour later, I received a single reply. "We will talk when you get home." This was for the best. Melissa was in danger. I tried calling Melissa next, but she too was unavailable. The betrayal felt like a physical wound in my chest. I spent the entire night pacing my hotel room, alternating between rage, disbelief, and panic. How could this possibly be legal? How had they even accessed my property documents? I had never given them keys to my villa or shown them where I kept important papers. The violation was beyond anything I could have imagined from my own family. The next morning, I informed my boss that a family emergency required my immediate return to the States. My colleague Jason agreed to take over the final negotiation phases. I could see the disappointment in my boss's eyes through the video call, but he nodded understanding. "Family comes first, Reed. Jason can handle things from here." If only he knew the bitter irony of that statement. The 13-hour flight from Tokyo to San Francisco was pure torture. The spotty airplane Wi-Fi prevented me from properly researching my legal options or contacting my lawyer friend Alexander for advice. Every minute felt like an hour, as physical symptoms of stress manifested: headache, nausea, trembling hands. The betrayal consumed my thoughts. How long had they been planning this? Had the supportive video calls been a distraction while they were literally stealing my home? Upon landing, I immediately called Alexander while waiting for my luggage. He was shocked by my situation and promised to meet me as soon as possible. I rented a car and drove straight to my villa, exceeding the speed limit the entire way, rehearsing the confrontation to come. When I pulled up to my property, my stomach dropped. A sold sign stood prominently in the front yard, as if celebrating the theft of everything I had worked for. I sat in my car, staring at the sign, unable to even approach the front door that no longer belonged to me, according to my own parents. Instead of going inside, I drove directly to my parents' home an hour away. Their cars were in the driveway, along with Melissa's recognizable red sports car. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation, and rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, surprise registering on her face. "Reed, we weren't expecting you until next week. How was Tokyo?" The normality of her greeting felt like another slap in the face. I pushed past her into the dining room where my father and Melissa sat eating dinner, as if nothing were wrong. The scene was so ordinary, so disconnected from the catastrophe they had created. "Would you like to explain how you sold my house without my permission?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My father put down his fork. "Now, Reed, we know you're upset, but you need to understand the situation. Melissa got involved with some dangerous people at that casino downtown. They were threatening her." Melissa looked up, tears already forming in her eyes. "I never meant for it to go this far, Reed. It started with small bets then. I tried to win back what I lost, and before I knew it. So you decided to steal my house," I interrupted. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That property is in my name. You had no legal right to sell it." My parents exchanged glances. "We found the documents in your home office," my mother explained, as if this somehow justified their actions. "You always said family comes first, Reed. Melissa could have been seriously hurt if we didn't pay those men. So, you forged my signature, committed fraud. Instead of, I don't know, calling me." My voice rose with each question. "I was answering your video calls every day. You watched me work on the biggest contract of my career, while planning to steal my home behind my back." The argument escalated quickly. My parents insisted they had acted out of necessity to protect Melissa. They genuinely believed they had made the right choice, the needs of one child outweighing the property rights of another. Melissa alternated between tearful apologies and entitled statements about family obligation. Not once did any of them truly acknowledge the magnitude of their betrayal. "We are your family, Reed," my father shouted. "That house is just a thing. Melissa's safety matters more than your vacation property." "It was my home," I said, my voice breaking. "And you had no right." The next morning I met Alexander at his law office, bringing every document related to the villa I could find in my files. After reviewing everything, his expression turned grave. "This is straight-up fraud, Reed. Your signature was clearly forged on these sales documents. The bigger question is how they pushed this through so quickly. Real estate transactions typically take weeks. We hired a private investigator who discovered more disturbing details. The villa had sold for $750,000 under market value in an all-cash deal completed in just 3 days. The buyers traced back to a company with connections to the same casino where Melissa had accumulated her debts. Even more shocking was the evidence that my parents had been planning this for at least 3 weeks. Email records obtained through legal discovery showed communications about the property dating back to before my trip. They had been acting normally during our video calls, while actively working to sell my home without my knowledge. The investigation also revealed that Melissa's gambling debts were far larger than admitted, nearly $400,000, not the $230,000 they had claimed. The casino had essentially purchased my million-dollar property at a steep discount to settle her markers. With this evidence, I filed a formal police report alleging fraud, forgery, and theft. The detective assigned to the case reviewed the documents and immediately opened a criminal investigation. "This is one of the more straightforward cases of real estate fraud I've seen," he told me. "But I have to ask, are you sure you want to pursue charges against your family?" I nodded without hesitation. "Yes, they need to face consequences for their actions." When my parents received official notice of the criminal investigation, they called in a panic. "Reed, what have you done?" "The police came to our house. They're saying we could face felony charges." "You committed multiple felonies," I replied flatly. "What did you expect?" The news spread quickly through our extended family. Calls and texts flooded in showing the deep divisions in family loyalty. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Stephen supported my decision, saying my parents had crossed an unforgivable line. But others, including my grandparents, were horrified that I would involve the police in a family matter. "How could you do this to your own parents?" my grandmother demanded. "Family disputes should stay private." Childhood friends who knew my family took sides as well. Many embraced the narrative that I was overreacting to what was essentially a family helping each other in crisis. "Dude, it's just a house," said my friend Taylor, who had known me since elementary school. "Your sister could have been hurt by loan sharks." The isolation grew as more people expressed disappointment in my decision to pursue legal action. I checked into an extended stay hotel, unable to return to my sold villa, yet unwilling to stay with family or friends who didn't support me. Meanwhile, my abrupt departure from Tokyo had consequences. Though Jason managed to complete the negotiations, the clients were unhappy with the sudden change in representation. The contract was signed for a significantly reduced amount, and my boss made it clear that my career advancement had taken a serious hit. Sitting alone in my hotel room, I felt I had lost everything: my home, my family relationships, my professional momentum, and many friendships. For the first time since childhood, I broke down, completely questioning everything I thought I knew about my family and my place in it. The police investigation moved quickly. My parents were formally interviewed with their hastily hired attorney present. According to the detective, they appeared genuinely shocked at the severity of potential consequences, multiple felony charges carrying possible prison time. Melissa finally admitted to the full extent of her gambling addiction during her police interview. She had been frequenting high-stakes poker games for over a year, using credit cards, personal loans, and finally casino credit to fund her addiction. The men who threatened her worked for the casino, using intimidation to collect outstanding debts from problem gamblers. As the investigation progressed, I experienced conflicting emotions. While part of me felt vindicated that the truth was coming to light, another part felt hollow, watching my family face criminal charges. Despite their betrayal, these were still the people who raised me. Local media somehow got wind of the unusual case. Tech executives, "Villa fraudulently sold by parents to cover sister's gambling debts," read one headline. My name and photograph appeared in several articles, adding public humiliation to the family's troubles. I received concerned calls from colleagues, and my company's PR department requested a meeting to discuss brand protection. Then came the unexpected break that changed everything. I received a call from a man named Jordan Parker. "Mr. Wilson, my name is Jordan Parker. I was the real estate agent involved in the sale of your villa. I think we should talk." We met at a quiet coffee shop the next day. Jordan appeared nervous, repeatedly checking his phone and glancing around the cafe. "What I did was wrong," he began. "Your parents came to my office saying they had power of attorney to sell your property while you were overseas. They had documents, but the whole thing felt rushed. They wanted an all-cash deal, quick closing, minimal paperwork." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I knew something wasn't right, but the commission was huge. I justified it by telling myself it wasn't my job to verify their story beyond the documents they provided." What he said next stunned me. After the sale closed, I couldn't sleep, so I started recording our conversations. California is a two-party consent state for recordings, but I just kept my phone recording in my pocket whenever they came to finalize paperwork. Jordan pulled out his phone and played a recording. I heard my mother's voice clearly. "Reed is too busy with his Tokyo trip to handle this. We have authorization to sell on his behalf." Then my father. "Our daughter is in trouble and Reed would want us to help her. He just doesn't need to be bothered with the details right now." "There's more," Jordan said. "Much more. They explicitly acknowledged you didn't know about the sale in several conversations. I'm coming forward because I could lose my license for participating in this even unknowingly. I've already spoken with my attorney." I sat there shocked at this unexpected turn of events. "Would you be willing to provide these recordings to the police?" He nodded. "Already done." My attorney advised full cooperation. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a weight lifting. Finally, irrefutable evidence beyond just my word against theirs. 2 days later, Jordan called my parents with follow-up questions about the paperwork. Unknown to them, this call was being recorded with police knowledge as part of the investigation. "I've been reviewing the sale documents," Jordan said casually, "and I'm concerned about some potential legal issues that might affect the validity of the transaction." My father's voice sounded immediately defensive. What kind of issues the sale is complete? Well, Jordan continued, there are specific requirements for selling property on someone else's behalf. The power of attorney document you provided doesn't specifically grant real estate transfer powers. This could mean the sale isn't legally binding. The panic in my mother's voice was unmistakable. But the money has already been paid to the casino. The debt is settled. I'm just concerned because I've been contacted by Reed, Jordan added. There was a long silence before my father spoke, his voice lower. What exactly did Reed tell you? He says he never authorized the sale and that his signature was forged. If that's true, we all could be facing serious legal problems. What followed was 15 minutes of my parents frantically trying to convince Jordan to hide evidence and maintain their version of events. They offered additional money, pleaded about family loyalty, and finally resorted to veiled threats about ruining his reputation if he cooperated with my vendetta. The recording became key evidence in building the criminal case. Listening to it in the detective's office, hearing my parents' desperation and deception in their own voices, was both validating and heartbreaking. But the most significant revelation was yet to come. 2 years earlier, after witnessing how my parents enabled Melissa's financial irresponsibility, I had taken steps to protect my assets. Working with a specialized attorney, I placed my villa into a carefully structured property trust with myself as both grantor and primary trustee. This legal arrangement specifically required trustee approval for any property transfer or sale. The documents establishing this trust were not kept at the villa, but in a safety deposit box at my bank. This meant that, even with forged signatures, the sale of the property was legally void. The trust, not me personally, owned the villa, and the trust had never approved the sale. When Alexander discovered this during his review of my financial arrangements, he immediately filed an emergency injunction to halt the property transfer. The court quickly froze all aspects of the transaction pending investigation. Upon learning of these legal complications and the criminal investigation, the buyers backed out of the deal entirely unwilling to be entangled in what was clearly becoming a complicated legal battle. The casino, sensing potential legal exposure for their collection tactics, suddenly became much more amenable to negotiating a revised payment plan for Melissa's debts. My foresight in creating the trust, a decision I had almost forgotten about in the chaos, proved to be the crucial factor that would allow me to reclaim my home. I arranged a meeting at Alexander's office, requesting my parents and Melissa attend. They arrived looking nervous and defensive, but still somehow expecting reconciliation. "Reed, we hope this meeting means you're ready to drop these ridiculous charges," my father began. "We're still your family, regardless of our disagreement." Alexander laid out 3 folders on the conference table. "Before we begin, I want everyone to understand the gravity of the situation." From the first folder, he produced the forged documents, pointing out the falsified signatures. From the second, transcripts of Jordan's recordings highlighting the most damning statements from my parents. Their faces grew increasingly pale as Alexander methodically presented the evidence. "These offenses carry potential sentences of up to 7 years in state prison," he explained clinically. "The evidence is overwhelming." My mother began to cry. "We were just trying to help Melissa. You have to understand." I remained silent as Alexander opened the third folder, revealing the trust documents. "Even if the signatures had been genuine, the sale would still be invalid," he explained. "The property was owned by a trust, not by Reed personally. This trust explicitly prohibited any sale without trustee approval." The realization dawned on their faces. Not only had they committed serious crimes, but their efforts had been futile from the start. The property could never have been legally sold regardless of their forgeries. Melissa broke down entirely. "I have a problem," she sobbed. "I kept thinking I could win it all back. The casino people kept offering credit. I never meant for any of this to happen." My parents sat stunned, finally comprehending the depth of trouble they faced. "Here are my terms," I said, speaking for the first time. "I have discussed this with the district attorney, and they will consider my wishes regarding prosecution." I laid out my conditions clearly. First, I would not press charges under strict conditions. Melissa would enter a comprehensive gambling addiction treatment program immediately, with compliance monitored by the court. My parents would be required to attend both family therapy and financial boundaries counseling. Most importantly, they would sign a legally binding agreement preventing them from accessing any of my property or financial information ever again. Melissa would take responsibility for her debts by getting a job and entering a structured repayment plan with the casino, which had become surprisingly cooperative when faced with potential legal scrutiny of their collection practices. The hardest consequence, I told my parents, is that everyone in our community will know what you did. There will be no hiding behind family loyalty or privacy. The truth will be public. They reluctantly agreed to all conditions, recognizing it as their only alternative to criminal prosecution. In the following weeks, I worked with Alexander to legally void the fraudulent sale. I returned to my villa, immediately changing all locks and access codes, and installing a comprehensive security system with cameras covering every entrance. That first night back in my home was bittersweet. The space that had once represented achievement and peace now carried the weight of betrayal. Sitting on my deck watching the sunset, I realized recovery would take time. The trauma of having my sanctuary violated by my own family had changed something fundamental in my relationship with this place. The months that followed were a period of painful growth. Initially, anger dominated my emotions. Anger at my family's betrayal, at friends who had taken their side, at the unfairness of nearly losing everything I had worked for. I maintained minimal contact with my parents and Melissa, communicating primarily through Alexander about their compliance with our agreement. Therapy became my lifeline, helping me process the complex emotions of family betrayal. My therapist helped me understand that my parents' actions reflected long-established patterns of favoritism and boundary violations rather than a sudden personality change. At work, I slowly rebuilt my professional reputation, taking on challenging projects and delivering exceptional results. My boss eventually acknowledged that my family emergency had been legitimate, though the details remained private. I began building stronger relationships with people who had stood by me, particularly my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Stephen, who had supported my decision to hold my parents accountable. I discovered that while I had lost some shallow friendships, the ones that remained were deeper and more authentic. 6 months after the incident, I agreed to have dinner with my parents and Melissa at a neutral restaurant. The conversation was awkward and tense, but it was a beginning. Melissa, now 3 months sober from gambling, looked healthier than she had in years. My parents were more subdued, the consequences of their actions having permanently altered their self-image as well-meaning parents. I am not ready to forgive yet, I told them honestly, but I am willing to see if we can build something new from here. The old relationships are gone. They nodded, understanding that this was already more than they deserved. 1 year later, I found myself hosting a small gathering at my villa. The property had been completely redesigned inside a symbolic reclaiming of the space. New furniture, different paint colors, rearranged rooms, all helped transform it from a place of betrayal to a fresh beginning. Among the guests were my aunt and uncle, several close friends, and surprisingly my parents and Melissa. Our relationship remained complicated, but it was evolving into something more honest. The enforced therapy and counseling had forced my parents to confront their enabling behaviors and favoritism. Melissa, now 14 months into recovery, had maintained steady employment and was gradually repaying her debts. As we gathered on the deck, watching the sunset over the Pacific, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from this painful chapter. I had discovered the importance of legal self-protection, even with family. I had learned which relationships could withstand crisis and which would crumble. Most importantly, I had found strength I never knew I possessed. Sometimes the most valuable lesson comes from the most painful teacher, I told the small group. I learned that love without respect and boundaries is not really love at all. My mother nodded, slightly tears in her eyes. The hard-earned wisdom had cost us all dearly, but perhaps it had not been purchased in vain. I have come to believe that family relationships, like all others, must be built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. Blood ties alone cannot justify betrayal or exempt people from the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is hold others accountable, even when forgiveness seems the easier path. What about you? Where do you draw boundaries with family? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and self-protection? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for joining me today. And remember that sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we are born into.